Hello and welcome to Spiritu Inspiratus, the official podcast of Hazelwood School. I'm Henry, your host, a proud alumni and now the performing arts technician here at Hazelwood. This podcast is all about celebrating the spirit of our school, its opportunities, the community and the vibrant life that happens every day here. Together we'll shine a light on the people, the passions and projects that make Hazelwood so special, guided by our motto Spiritu Inspiratus, which literally means lungfuls of inspiration in Latin. So whether you're a student, a parent, a teacher, or simply curious about Hazelwood, join us as we explore the heart of our school and share the stories that inspire. Today on the show, I'm delighted to welcome Lynn Brighting, our Head of Science here at Hazelwood. Miss Brighting has a real passion for not only the wonders of science, but also helping our students develop the skills they need to think critically and communicate with respect. This episode, she's going to be guiding us through a fascinating topic of how to argue politely. It's more than just about debating, it's about listening, respecting different viewpoints and finding common ground. Skills that are not just important in a lab, as they are in real life. So let's jump in and hear from Lynn about how we can argue better and kinder.
Hello everyone. At Hazelwood, I am absolutely passionate about science, and one of the topics that we like to include in our lessons is how to debate, or some people say argue, politely in their science lessons. It's not about who wins the argument, it's about disagreeing respectfully, listening carefully, and backing up their ideas with evidence. Well, there are a few ground rules really. So first off is obviously we talk to each other in a respectful tone, using respectful language. Try not to interrupt each other. Don't make it personal. Focus on the idea, the topic that's being argued or discussed, and to think about the evidence. Opinions are fine, but scientific arguments should be supported with data, facts, observations. As a teacher, sometimes we have to give a prompt, we have to give them a framework of how to start the debate. So, for instance, we could say, I see your point, but have you considered? I understand what you're saying, or another way to look at it, or that's interesting, but the evidence that I read suggests, or can you explain why you think like that? Obviously, as a teacher, we are role models. So we could actually do some role play within the class setting, and we keep it structured. Okay, in science there are often misconceptions, so we can set up debates around those misconceptions. For example, is Pluto a planet? Should humans colonize Mars? Is nuclear energy a good option for the future?
And these are all really, really interesting points. And like you said, these are all things that we can have different opinions on, but we can all look at the same facts and interpret that in different ways. What does a healthy argument look like? And what does a healthy debate look like? And how does that differ from becoming an argument that gets out of house? And what are some common mistakes that people make when trying to argue their points? And some great strategies that we can use to respectfully stand our ground and give our points with evidence-based research. Looking at Key Stage 3, so that's year 7, 8 and 9. Let's jump in with some of the year 8 topics we could be debating, which is all linked to broader science issues. And we're linking knowledge to society and also ethical aspects, which I think is really important to kind of weigh all that up when it comes to a debate. So some of these are really, really interesting points, like should nuclear power replace fossil fuels in our ever-changing world? Should zoos exist and why are they cruel? And should we use renewable energy? I think renewable energy is a really, really good point, and it's a great one to look at when it comes to actually seeing the pros and cons, because I think every single one does have pros and cons when we look at energy. So what would your opinions be, and where would you start a debate when it comes to, for example, nuclear power?
So in year 8, we look at renewable and non-renewable energy resources, and obviously nuclear power is very important, especially in the current age that we are living, where we are trying to use more and more renewable fuels, even though nuclear is actually a non-renewable fuel. But the problem, and maybe the pupils at the age that we teach them at Key Stage 3 are not aware of, is that the waste from a nuclear power plant, there are problems. Where do we store that waste? Does it go into space? Does it go to the bottom of an ocean? So these are the sort of debates, discussions that we would create within a classroom setting.
So yeah, I think it's a really, really interesting issue, and it is one that really affects our modern world and our modern day. And I think it's really great to kind of have a deeper understanding of the real world around us and asking real questions that will ultimately affect all our lives. I think that's a really interesting thing. And this goes on to other topics that we look at. So in Year 9, for example, we look at complex, ethical and future-focused issues, like should humans colonise Mars, and should scientists be allowed to clone animals, etc. And I think this is a really interesting issue or debate to look at, especially when we think about like Dolly the sheep. These are all really life examples. So how would you go about that, and how would you look at some of these more ethical-focused and future-focused issues?
So yes, so really we're trying to make it have real world relevance, and obviously Year 9, so that will be for their future scores. And these are topics that if they have at least had some understanding from us at Hazelwood before they go there, that we will give them the skills with which to debate. And an ethical and future-focused debates, they're areas where you have to be very careful in the classroom, as I said before, not to make it personal. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but as a teacher we would structure the debate so that we may decide to have two teams going against each other. We may decide to have more smaller size groups, and then they all come together with their different ideas and we hold it as a whole class debate. So there's different strategies, but always it's not about who wins. It's being polite, respectful and kind to each other.
I think this comes back to one of our key points that we're doing this year. We've got compassion, and on our 2 feet we've got courage and respect. So these are real key skills that we kind of hone into our children to really kind of understand. I think this comes into a lot of what we do at Hazelwood, and debates are just one of them. You know, looking at this tiny corner, this is a really exciting space to begin. Lynn, can I ask you what common mistakes people make when they argue their point? And you told me how you structure it, and so how would you go about, whether it's giving people 2 minutes of time, whether it's structuring debates so everyone has a fair share and chance to speak and everyone can kind of formulate their own opinions? How would you go about structuring that, and what are common mistakes people make when it comes to a debate about scientific topics? But really this is really about life and general topics.
So I think that one of the most important strategies is not to allow one team to be more dominant than another. We can give them a time allowance. So we could say, okay, you've got 3-4 minutes to discuss, and then you can have 2 to 3 minutes to share your opinions. So we can put a time allowance on. We can also make it clear that while one team is discussing or debating, that they're not interrupted. So again, it's keeping everything fair.
Do you close the debate and kind of let people formulate their own opinions, and what's the process of doing that?
So after you've listened to each other side of the debate with respect and everyone being polite and not personal, we could have a whole class vote and use a decision based on the strongest evidence and politeness to see which side they agree with.
So thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Spiritu Inspiratus. A big thank you to our guest Lynn Brighting for sharing such insightful thoughts on how to argue politely and reminding us that listening and respect are just as powerful as those words itself. So I hope today's conversation has left you with a bit of inspiration to take into your own life here at Hazelwood and beyond, and hope you enjoyed this episode.